Great to see you.
Great to see you, brother. Thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Welcome to another episode of the Up Close podcast. Today we have the special, distinct pleasure of having a legal luminary. There's too much I could say, but I will say this gentleman has set the tone for all lawyers, not just lawyers, but just all African Americans and young professionals here in Florida. He's the first African American president of the Florida Bar, co-founder of Hacker, Pettis, and Schwalm here in Fort Lauderdale, and a mentor to so many, including myself. Thank you for joining us, Gene. How are you?
I'm doing well, my friend. I'm glad to be here.
It's a pleasure. Now, you know, there's so many things that I can start with you. I mean, your history, your pedigree, your resume is so long and speaks so much, but I want to start actually from the kind of the very beginning, right? And when I was doing a little research, I came to find out that at an early age, as a young boy, you actually had a speech impediment, and you were pronouncing a lot of your words with K's. And then tell us about that. How did that kind of shape you, and how did you overcome that?
You know, it's an interesting story because it's a indication it's not where you began. Who would have thought that little boy who everything I said had a sound to it, and all the way to my first grade, and water was quarter. Shirley, a family across the street from me that we were really close to, Shirley was Curly. Her daughter Lockie was Cocky. Greg was Quag. Joe was Cole. And they would call me over. My sister's I had 5 sisters, but one is 3 years older than me. She said, Mila, go get Gene. And they would come over there and they said, what's our name? And they would just laugh. And I thought it was funny, you know, being the center of attention. And then when I got to first grade, there's this plumber who's still alive. My first grade teacher said, I'm going to put him in speech lessons. And the county said he has to be in the second grade. She said, no, he's getting in speech now. And I would go on the bus from Northwest Section over to 31st Avenue. And it sounds like so close as we appreciate the city now. But back then that was a ride,
Right.
Because Fort Lauderdale was just so small. And I would go over there and they would practice my speech. And every single night, my mom would sit at the table with me and I would read and pronounce. And of all the careers that you'd have guessed that I could have had, the last would have been a trial lawyer, which all I do is speak. But that's a strong story that I utilize often.
Yeah.
And then I was doing it for, I thought it was funny. And now, you know, I use words as a part of my everyday.
You're a wordsmith now.
I'm a wordsmith. And I love trial work and I love speaking to juries and convincing people. So that's a journey.
It sure is. I mean, that's like a testament to a lot of young kids that it doesn't matter, you know, what impediments you start with, right?
You're right.
We can become the first of anything, of your profession, first bar president, first medical, first surgeon general, whatever, with a lot of work, of course.
Yeah, and it's really one of the things I think we don't do enough of. I was at the University of Florida a couple of weeks ago, and my wife Pam and I went over and spoke to the law students. Had about 20 African American law students there from Balsa, and I talked to a couple of them individually. And one young lady who's a 3L, getting ready to go out, she was speaking to me, but her head was down, not looking at me. And I literally got her arm and said, look me in my eyes. Look me in my eyes.
Confidence.
Gain some confidence. Yeah. And she's ready to go be a criminal lawyer at the public defender in Volusia County. And I said, you know, unless you get tougher and get confident, they're going to eat you alive.
Yeah.
So confidence, how to carry yourself, how to speak, those are soft skills that are not taught enough in school. And I think it's the underpinning and foundation for whatever success you want to accomplish.
Right. Now you have a Black Men to Men Summit, right, coming up tomorrow.
Today
at Nova Southeastern. And so I saw that the target range is young men, African American, between 18 and 35. And can you tell us, I mean, what is the impediment behind it? Why do you think that's important?
It's been something that I've observed over the last 8 to 9 months. I was at a fraternity meeting and they had a social action committee. and had a state representative and a state senator. And somehow the conversation turned to politics. And a young man mentioned, well, they haven't done anything for me. I may not, Biden was in the race at that time. I may not be voting for him, and said something about Trump. And the older brothers jumped all over him. And I said, guys, chill, relax. Let's have a conversation here. And I encourage Bobby DuBose to set up a conversation. I think this is an issue that we need to roundtable and give them a chance to be heard. That didn't happen. President Obama made his comments about 2 weeks ago, that, young black men, I can't understand why you wouldn't be supporting Kamala Harris. And I think that you're using excuses. And there was a big pushback on that. And there are two things we can do. We can jump on one side and forget the other, or we can sit down and try to bring the two together. And the purpose of this 18 to 35-year-old group, which is Gen Z, I guess, and Gen X, they see life differently than we do. I'm clearly I'm a baby boomer, 1960. And I see the world differently than you, or even people younger than you see it. Y'all have come up in a different time, and you're getting your information from different sources than we did. We got it from our village, people around us, our church that gave us our news. If you wanted to look at the newspaper, you could look at the newspaper, but news traveled differently then. We were not informed nor persuaded by social media that's in place. So the idea tonight is to have a conversation of the generations. And there'll be on the panel, you have two young guys that embody Gen Z, and you're going to have three older gentlemen who are in the ground roots of having conversations with brothers in the neighborhood. And I believe until we can have those conversations and start bridging some of our gaps of division, we'll never have the strength that we should as a demographic. And we have a lot of areas to improve. And this is step one. I'm not going to resolve in 2 hours all of the challenges, but I think they start with the conversation. And I'm excited. I'm excited for tonight to do that first summit, and I believe it's going to have a very positive outcome. I don't care if it's 10 people in the room. Give me 10 committed people, and I'll go to war with that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so this seems like maybe this is part of your outlook and your agenda that you had. I saw that you wrote an article in law.com right after George Floyd death, untimely death, about having a conversation on race. But how do we bring, other allies to the table in this?
I think that, and as I look back on my life, I'm in my last chapter of my professional career. I've been almost 39 years, not retiring tomorrow, but in reality, I'm getting closer. The thing that I keep coming back to, I've done it all of my career as I reflect back in my University of Florida days. I've been a force of trying to bring people together.
Yes.
When I got to University of Florida, I saw two different campuses, the black and the white. I was president of the Black Student Union my first year. And I went into Art Sandine. He just died about a month ago. He was a great gentleman. He was the vice president of student affairs. I said, Mr. Sandine, I'm Eugene Pettis, president of the Black Student Union. I have a plan. Get involved campaign. All of these organizations around here, I don't see any black students in there, and I want to bring them together. He backed me, and we had to get involved campaign. And it was very successful, and it broke some barriers and gave permission and some acceptance. Permission from one side and acceptance from the other to get involved. When I was bar president, if you look back in the records, in my elect year, when you get a chance to select all of the chair people and committee members, like 700-800 people, I did the Get Involved campaign again and reached out intentionally to all people, Asian, Hispanics, whites, blacks, you name it. And we had the largest number of black folks that had ever applied.
Wow.
Because I reached out and brought them into the mix. And I think everything starts with the conversation. When George Floyd died, it was shocking to me, as it was everyone else, to be so blatant in the open sunlight. And I reached out to our chief judge, and I said, we have to do something. We need to talk. And he said, okay, when do you want to talk? I was at the airport. I was heading to see my daughter in New Orleans. And we talked that next Monday. And that's where my podcast started.
Oh, wow.
Can we talk 360? To have conversations. And it's okay to people to have different views on everything.
Right.
We don't have to isolate because of that. We can embrace and learn something from each other. And that's a conversation that I put together 2 panels at the Tower Club, where I was chairman of the Tower Club at that time. Had white, everybody, you name it, in the demographic spectrum we have, were on 2 different panels, and white guys were crying. One, Dan Lindblade, who is the CEO president of the Greater Fort Lauderdale Chamber of Commerce. He's from Minneapolis, and he couldn't believe that happened in his community. And he was so hurt that he just didn't see that in his community. But I think when we talk to each other, we can learn from each other. And that is a lost art now in our politic. It's never been more divisive. It's never been more cruel. And the only way we're going to get out of it is build some new relationships with those that are not of extreme positions, and show that as I travel the world, people want the same thing.
Uh-huh.
I want to be able to make a living, to support my family. I want my family and my children to be helpful, and I want them to have, prosperity. That's what we all want. And we shouldn't dole that out based on where you come from. That's what the American fabric and the dream is all about. So I just fight for those principles in every which way I can to let's talk through our issues, whether it's within the bond of our brotherhood or it's broader in the spectrum of our community. There's positivity to be gained by a conversation.
Absolutely. And your trajectory, since probably you matriculated at UF, has been one of bringing people together, right? And bringing, making people bond, and from all different walks of life, right? And I saw that as one of the initiatives that you started as the bar president was the William Reese Fellowship.
William Reese Smith Leadership Academy.
What was the, driving force behind that? What was the intention?
I'd been on the board of governors for about 6 years, and 6 to 8 years. And when I made my decision, I was going to run for president. And the Florida Bar used to do a diversity symposium every year. Everybody get together and they would talk. 12 months have passed and we'll get together again. And there was nothing being done in the middle. Just no move, no change, nothing changing. We're talking. And I can't be a person in a room just talking. I like action. And I came up with this idea. One day after church, I sat on my couch and I started drawing it out of how I can create this academy. And I kept building the concept. And I had the concept because I'd driven around the state of Florida, going to bar associations, meeting people, and I saw strong bar associations and I saw associations that were not strong. And I wanted to teach the skills of success, communication, networking, strategic planning, so on and so forth. Understanding the audience, knowing how to navigate in different rooms by studying people's personalities and that type of stuff. Those are essential skills, I think, to any success, whether you're a lawyer, business person, whatever. And our lawyers were not getting those skills. Law school doesn't teach that. Yes, it doesn't. So, and I saw that as being the differentiator between successful bar associations and not successful. So what was my idea? Let's groom some new leaders. And I made it very clear and known that I wanted to be as diverse as the rainbow who we are in the state of Florida. Black men were underrepresented, and from Asian to Indian to you name it. It was truly an intentional effort to make sure it's representative. And that first 60 fellows stood up on the day I was saying my acceptance speech. And it's gone now. We're in our 11th year.
Wow.
And I've gotten so many emails from people. We have probably 15 to 16 judges, white, black, you name it. Harold Pryor, who's one of your past guests, is our first African American state attorney in the state of Florida. We have Worrell up in Orlando. All of those are Leadership Academy graduates, and they talk about confidence that it gave them. And I just this weekend I was at the Caribbean Bar Association. Somebody came up to me and said, "I'm in the Leadership Academy," and I said, I always ask, "How are you enjoying it?" "Oh, it's just so great. It gave me confidence. I would have never done this. I'd have never done that." So that word I've mentioned a little earlier, confidence is important.
Right.
And too often our people haven't been given that encouragement at home, in their neighborhoods, in their families, to be confident and to step forward with that confidence that you can accomplish whatever it is you want to accomplish. And that's an ingredient of what I tried to put into place with the William Reese Smith Leadership Academy. And the name came from the fact that William Reese Smith was a servant leader par excellence. He was the president of the Florida Bar, president of the ABA, and president of the International Bar Association. I happened to meet him. He was with Carlton Fields. He passed away the year that I started the Leadership Academy, and he did not. His son came and accepted the honor at one of our meetings, at one of my meetings, but he had passed away, and I thought it was important to preserve that name so people can know what servant leadership looks like.
Absolutely, absolutely. So one of the interesting things is that there's so many people that have come through that program, but that starts when they become a lawyer. Mm-hmm. We already know that a lot of the minorities are underrepresented in the profession. Mm-hmm. Now, how do we because since I've left law school, even the African-American population, Black population in my law school has gone down, not up, and we're already underrepresented. How do we cure that?
I'm involved right now in a Black Alumni Coalition at the University of Florida. When our past president, Ben Sass, elected to disband all DEI on March 1st and fired everybody who had a role in it. It was a couple of dozen people that were in the colleges, the individual colleges within the university, within the administration. And I found it unacceptable. I had spoken to him on numerous occasions about it. I told him it was coming, and how are you going to deal with it? I was at a meeting 2 weeks ago with the current president up at the University of Florida, Kent Fox, who has a different view on it and is more supportive of it. I don't care what you call it. Right. DEI wasn't around when I was in school, but doing the right thing is always in fashion. And to give people a even playing ground and a community that develops and supports you through the course of your years of college, it's critically important. And you should not be at a university anywhere that you feel isolated, not supported, not seen. And those are the things that I'm still working on. We have a coalition of about 150 individuals, obviously of every group. There's a core that sticks with it, but those that have come through it are about 150. And we're still pushing forward to make the change at the University of Florida that I think is right. And I don't think the politic of DeSantis, our governor, should permeate through education. That's where we come together. I look back in my college years. That's when I met people from backgrounds that I'd never spent time with. Mm-hmm. If we break up that opportunity, we're going into society not knowing how to even deal with each other, which is not good for our society. We need to come together with people from around the world and learn the differences amongst us and find common ground. And when you get rid of certain programs that they put DEI as a negative on a title on it, I think it does ill to the community and the society as a whole. And I get really angry when I read and hear of people making diversity and inclusion and equity sound bad. And there was a gentleman who talked about people of the extreme right says did not earn it. That's what it stands for, quote unquote. And he talked about, he's a Muslim gentleman. He said the epitome of did not earn it is how so many of these folks, white males, etc., that this country was built on taking millions of acres of land from the natives. Women didn't get a chance to be in the business arena to 1974. Black folks couldn't vote and couldn't do anything until the 60s. And the amount of land that was taken from people, and now they believe
It was earned.
they earned it. That's the epitome of you didn't earn it. But they don't see it that way. So, we just have to be real. And I just believe that, again, that's something that banging our fists on the table is not going to change it. We've got to have some conversations and educate people. And that's the danger of taking history out of the schools. There's a reason why he wants to take Black history out of schools. If you don't know your history, you don't know whence you've come, and you don't see it coming again. That's basic, but it's dangerous. And I think there should be an outcry. And the thing that I've said to many people is, I don't blame the politician for that. We should be teaching our own history. You look at our Jewish brothers. They don't rely on the state to teach their history.
Correct.
They teach their children from day one.
Correct.
They're committed to their history so that it will never happen again. The Holocaust will never happen again. We should take responsibility for teaching our history in our communities, in our churches, in our organizations. And if you do that, they can't take that away from you.
Correct.
Your children will be full with their history, and your history gives you confidence.
Absolutely.
From whence we've come.
Absolutely. And I will even take it a step further in that there's been a push towards African Americans trying to learn more about their history, because their history doesn't start from 1780 or 1680, right? History goes back, hundreds and thousands of years back to Africa. And, me being a native Ghanaian, there's been a push I see for a lot of African Americans to discover their history, and going all the way back to Ghana and other West African countries. Now, what do you see is the benefit, or what will it do if African Americans and Africans have a chance to mutually learn each other's history and work?
Yeah, I was in Africa for a month this past summer, from end of May to end of June.
Where?
We flew into Johannesburg, over to Cape Town, over to Zambia and Botswana.
Okay.
Spent a lot of time in Zambia. But I really wanted to make, while I was there, I didn't just want to see animals. I've seen animals before.
At the zoo.
The zoo, and I've been to Africa before, so I'd seen that. And I enjoyed it. We had some great safaris, but I wanted to see some culture. I wanted to get to see the people. And it's incredible how resilient and joyful the people of Africa are. People that have absolutely nothing in areas that are as isolated and desolate as you could possibly imagine, have smiles on their faces. Children at 40 degrees with just a little clothing on are running down the river banks saying hello with smiles that would light up, the sky. And they have nothing, but there's joy in their heart. You see people that have withstood in South Africa, the apartheid and all of that happened for all of those years. The majority being ruled by a minority, brutally ruled by the minority. And I was there a few years after Mandela came into presidency, and I asked the cab driver, how have things been? And he said, we're making progress. He said, the Afrikaans didn't want to give up power because they thought we were going to retaliate. Yeah. And he said, we're not interested in retaliating. We're interested in moving forward and having our rights and equality. So they have a resilience that I think would give some confidence. We see it with all of the island people that we have in our community. They come with a different confidence and a different feeling of belonging. It's in the United States, you don't get that type of culture. It's the opposite force, that you don't belong. You're not equal. And the community has to build you up. Your community has to build you up. From those islands and other countries, they're all people of color, right. And they come with confidence and skills of success because they've had the occasion and the opportunities to do it. So I think coming together could really bring together some enlightenment, for lack of a better word, enrichment of how our people have prospered in centuries past and build pyramids and build countries and came up with inventions that we don't get credit for because of patents being stolen from them. And that would give anybody confidence that I can do it if I know that my ancestors did it.
When you see people that look like you see representation that
Absolutely
matters a lot. I mean, like just myself, I, grew up here, but I was born in Africa. My parents are from Ghana. And so all of the leaders that I know, I could touch them. They look like me.
Mm-hmm.
They're doctors, they're lawyers, they're politicians, they're ambassadors. So it put no ceiling on where I could be, even though I was in America, and America's message to Black men and Black people is oftentimes negative and not,
exactly.
Not seeing that, hey, you can do what you want,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of confidence gave me the ability to, persevere and go forward. Now, I'd love to have you come to Ghana with me, bring some young men, bring some guys,
If I showed you my phone right now, I have such a soft heart for people. I think God has blessed me with riches that are not for just me, it's to share. And I have two people over in Zambia, a brother who I met at one of the schools. And I mean, he was on me. He asked for my number. I gave it to him, and he was on me every day. And I was like, it was overwhelming. So I said, how much is your schooling? He wanted to do something. It's not a border patrol. They call it something else, but he wants that training. And then it was not that much in their currency. It's in our currency. It was less than $1,000.
Wow.
But it was life-changing for him. So finally I said, yeah, every day he woke up, it was his agenda to get in touch with me and to just push. And George Zulu.
Brazilian guy.
And I said, when do you start school? He said, January. I said, we got some time. This was in June.
Get ready.
And I was able to finally facilitate it. And I hope it takes him and his family and his village to greater heights. One of the things that I thought of when you were mentioning the difference of examples, role models that you saw when you were in your homeland, we ask our children here to dream. We don't really expose them to a whole lot to dream toward.
Mm.
That's why so many want to be a rapper, a basketball player, a football player. They see those things in our community. We need to give them some exposure to dream larger, to be exposed. I was once speaking to a group with the Handy program here, which is a great group. Kurt Brown is the CEO now. But I was in a room with some high school kids. I was bar president, and I was having breakfast with them. And one of the young men I saw, he was at the window looking down. So when I got a chance they all introduced themselves to me, and he indicated, I've never been in a building this high. Now he lives right over here, a half a mile across the street. And this was new to him. What are we doing? When we're in these buildings, it would take zero off your day to just invite a few of them in.
Come up there,
man, and sit in the conference room, get a feel for belonging. And I started the Community Education Alliance about 10 years ago, dealing with the literacy issue. Our children, I was at a meeting. I represented the school board for 30 years. I was at a meeting with the Black board chairperson, and late Ben Williams said 70% of our boys are not graduating.
70%.
70%. So I called up Donnie Carter.
It's an epidemic.
Who was a brother, who's the deputy. And I called him. I said, Donnie, I heard this. Did I hear it right? Yeah. The hell are you all doing? How can you go to sleep at night as two Black men and your sons are not graduating? And I knew, because I was on Broward College's board for 17 years, that those of the 30%, some of them go there and they don't finish there. So you have a demographic that's ill-prepared to succeed. So when I created the Community Education Alliance, it was built toward addressing literacy, which is a big problem in our society across the country. that these kids are not learning how to read. You'll be shocked. The parents don't know how to read efficiently. And what we've done, I took the program over to my church, New Mount Olive Baptist Church, and have a director. My wife is the chairperson of the board. But we're trying to teach these kids to read at earlier age. That's fundamental. If you're not able to read by the third grade, there are two things. You're on a course, and there's studies out there, if you look it up, to likely have some criminality in your background. There are prisons being already
Built.
constructed on that demographic alone. Number two, every other study that you do is going to be difficult. You can't do math if you can't read the questions, just on and on and on.
Right.
So these kids have to be taught how to read. It's a basic. And one of my schools, Dillard High School, brought a year ago spring about 25, 30 kids. Literally a school bus brought them over to our place over on the beach. And I got another friend of mine who was in one tower and I'm in another. He's the former CEO of Nestle's water bottling company, Global. He was over in Switzerland. Great brother and family. And we brought 15 to my condo and 15 to their condo to see there's another side of life.
Yeah.
You can look out. I was at that time on the 23rd floor. He's on the 28th floor. You can look out the ocean. You can look. It's all possible.
Yeah.
And these kids, if they're smarter than I was. And I just think it's very important to nurture some positivity and exposure to these students and our youth. To give them something to dream toward.
Yeah, and you're working, quite a bit with these youth. And, I'm looking back at who were my role models. Who were some of your role models growing up or inspirations that you saw in the community or maybe even out of the community?
Yeah, I came up at a different time in Fort Lauderdale, and the neighborhood was different. I had a lot of role models. When I was bar president, they asked, who is your role model? I said, I have a lot of role models. My family, my dad, but particularly my mom was a superwoman. Just covered every base of life and taught me how to be a man, how to stand up straight, how to treat ladies, how to do everything. All things are possible if you only believe type learning. I had teachers at Stranion High School that I stayed in touch with. I lost one of my mentors last January.
Your basketball coach?
My basketball coach, Jennings Coleman, who was not only my high school coach, but he followed me to the University of Florida for my graduation. He followed me to the bar presidency. We became, he was a lifetime mentor. I took him out to lunch. I'm going back now and touching those who have touched me. I did it 20 years ago when my kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Mack Smith, was 93 years old.
Wow.
I brought her to my home out in Plantation, and Coach Coleman and Mrs. McGriff and Mrs. McNeil and Coach Allen to say thank you. And Mrs. Plummer was there, my first grade teacher. 6 people that touched my life. And they all taught me something. I have a wonderful brother who's been, he's 9 years my senior. He was a dentist. He's now retired a few years back. And just seeing his footsteps and emulating what he did and what I wanted to do. And all of my mentors are not Black men. There are a lot of Black men, but I have people that have touched me in different ways. And I'm a believer that the mentor, the person that shapes your life, doesn't have to be the person that goes on a long journey with you. It could be somebody who touched you ever so slightly and redirects your life. I was headed to go to Bethune-Cookman College. And I was so close because all my family had gone to HBCU colleges, and that's where I was headed. And I had a academic tuition scholarship at the University of Florida, and I said no. And I go to my girlfriend's house, and this man who I saw one time in my life for about 1 minute of my life. And he turned out to be a dental student at the University of Florida. He said, I understand that you have a scholarship at the University of Florida. Why don't you want to go? I said, too many white students. He said, how many Black students do you need? I don't know. He said, well, there are 1,800 Black students at Florida, which I didn't know 1,800 Black people at that time. So he said, what is the other reason? I said, it's too big. I don't want to go to big campus. He said, every day you spend on that campus, it gets smaller. And he said, I think you're making a mistake. I said, thank you. I went on, courted my girlfriend. I went home that night and said, Mom, I want to go to University of Florida. That's a true story. She said, well, it depends if the scholarship's available. Monday morning, I went to talk to Mr. Gilliard. I said, Mr. Gilliard, I want to go to University of Florida. He said, well, it depends if that scholarship. I called Mr. Boatwright, who's at the University of Florida. Called Boatwright, Mr. Boatwright, and he said, send him. I went up sight unseen on June 9th, 1978, based on that one guy.
Wow.
And just stepped back. I was so close till I had a friend to go to Cookman, and she said, Gene, they're still calling you. And I'm telling them you're not coming to school.
Wow.
They were calling the roll.
Right.
It was that close that made the roll of who's coming. And I shifted and went to the University of Florida. And that was God sending one of his angels to brush me.
And that trajectory, who
just
knows?
took me to a whole different direction, man.
Yeah.
So, that's a blessing. That's an angel touching me. That's somebody who mentored me for a moment.
Yeah.
A minute
and
that had a
world of
major impact in my life.
Wow. And I mean, along the way, you had probably a lot of challenges, not just, from growing up in Fort Lauderdale in those times, but, even through your ascension through the Florida bar and as a lawyer. What are some of those challenges that, resonate with you to today that you overcame?
The podcast is probably not long enough, but I had a very brutal event that happened in my life in the 6th grade at Sullen Park. To cut to the chase, 2 white teachers, one coach and one white teacher, took me in the clinic for running across some grass and beat me with a strap like that. And I was from a family where you got in trouble in school, you may get a whipping when you get home. And I knew I didn't do anything worthy of that, but they beat me so bad. And I went home that day. I was the first person to get home. I pulled down my shorts and my buttocks and back are just bruised. And I lay down because I'm not feeling good. And my sister got home, and then she was in the backyard. And I saw on Saturday the young lady who told my sister, Mila, did Gene tell you he got a whipping in school? When Mom came home, what the sisters do, Mama Gene got a whipping in school, and I was still laying down. So Mom knew that's not my usual. And I come in, I pull my pants down. She hits the roof. That guy ends up getting fired. It turned me. I went down a path of just hatred. Yeah. Because these 2 white guys beat me for no reason.
Traumatic.
And I told them they beat me 100 times. At the investigation the next morning and beyond, they were taking pictures of my body and everything. The one coach said 5 times, one coach says 8 times. I said 100 times. The girl who told my sister was in the clinic behind the curtain and counted 67 licks.
Wow.
And I was at the doctor's office that night. That was a lesson. I came out fighting. I went to middle school fighting. I went to high school, the first 2 weeks of high school fighting. I was quick trigger. I just had hate and retaliation in my heart. And I remember Coach Anderson at Stranahan after week 2, he said, if you get in one more fight, you're suspended from school. And it's as if the heavens opened up. My life changed. Wow. And I left the school with every honor you could have, captain of the basketball team, homecoming queen, blah, 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 blah. My life changed. And it taught me a lesson it gave me a resilience to get past some challenges. It's not easy. Mm-hmm. Being a Black man, coming out of the University of Florida Law School, I went through in 84, 85, they were not hiring Black folks in these big firms. There were 3 at Holland and Knight in Fort Lauderdale in Miami. Henry Latimer was in Miami or right off the bench. And that was it across the state of Florida. And I got interviewed with all these big firms because of my total package. I was not the highest GPA, but I had a lot of leadership. I had a lot of experience. And I did very well in my interviews. And I would always go there and they would say, well, how are you, you'll be the first Black lawyer we have. How do you feel about that? And I would tell him, I've been to the University of Florida. I'm beyond that. I think you need to ask yourself,
how do
you feel about it?
Right.
I didn't get those jobs. I was probably too direct with them. But I mean, I went through a period of time where a guy up in Orlando said, if we hire you, can we tell Black jokes?
What?
Think about that.
That's,
and he said, we hired a woman and we can't tell women jokes anymore. Can we tell Black jokes? I said, I don't mind a good joke as long as you take a white joke out.
Right.
I didn't get that job, So the head of the firm was in the American College of Trial Lawyers with me, Butch Wooten. And 25 years later, I said, Butch, do you have a partner by the name of Mr. Sharp? He said, I had one. I said, okay. He said, what do you? I said, no, just I wanted my recollection to be accurate. So he kept pressing me. I was at a meeting. We were at a state meeting up in Jacksonville. And he said, why are you asking? And I told him the story. He said, Gene, I've never heard that. I apologize. He said, that's why the guy is no longer at the firm. He had issues. And that was Friday. Monday morning, he called me again. He said, Gene, I've been bothered all week about what you told me. And I want to apologize.
Wow.
And I said, Butch, it's not, life has turned out okay.
Yeah.
But those are the challenges that you had to deal with coming into my firm at Conrad Shear & James. I was hired by Rex Conrad. Last conversation I had with Henry Latimer, who was very good friends with Rex Conrad, was it was November. Henry died, I think, in January. He said, Gene, I can remember the day Rex Conrad called me and said that I was going to he was going to undo his bigoted ways. And he said, good for you, Rex. How are you going to do that? I'm hiring our first Black lawyer. He said, great. Who is it? It's Eugene Pettis. And he knew my family. I didn't know Henry, but he knew my family. He was, in fact, some of my older sister's PE teacher at Dillard when he first came to town. And Rex Conrad was another blessing from God. Despite his self-proclaimed bigoted history, he took me in. I was in a 3-week trial, day one, May 1st of 1985.
Wow.
Day one of my career was in trial 3 weeks with Rex Conrad on a brain-damaged baby case. And he built me up and gave me confidence that I could do it. And he was one of the people that I missed not being at my swearing in at the bar to say, look at the young man you invested in, how it all turned out. So there have been obstacles. But I'm one to not let obstacles deter me. And in fact, they energize me. And I try to give that confidence, that determination to others, that I was never the smartest person in the classroom, but I was determined nobody's going to outwork me. And the same thing I brought to my practice of law. I put a lot of commitment to this day in trying to do the things and be the change that I think we need to see in our society. And it's hard work, but it's a commitment that energizes me and gives me purpose.
And I mean, you've been the change that we need here. You continue to be the change. You continue to set a positive just image of Black men or men in general. And we appreciate you. And I'm letting you know, so you have to give people their flowers while they're alive. I'm letting you know that I've looked at you, looked up to you, and just admired your trajectory and what you've done in the community. Some people make it and forget, so to say, forget people, leave people behind, but you haven't done that. And that's a testament probably to, yourself, your family, your parents, your siblings, your community, your village, that you came from. We're almost done, but before we go, we usually ask our guests to ask one question they like to ask the next guest. And the last guest, their question was, what are you doing to make a difference? And listen, I know what it is, but
we walk this journey only one time. And I have always said that when that day comes that God calls me, I want to say that the world is a little better because I lived. I believe that to my core. That's multifaceted in so many different ways. That's racial relations, that's lifting up our people, that's giving people hope. You can't, I can't pass people that are in need, that our culture tell us that they're the others. They're there because of their decisions. So often they're not there because of it. Life happened. And some people didn't have the path that I had, but we can't forget about them. So I am committed to lifting up others of all demographics of our rainbow in this country, in this state, and this community. And I believe at the end of life, the only way we're going to have the best of humanity is when we stand as one. That's my core belief and principle that I stand on.
Absolutely. I love that message. I love that message, brother. Well, let me ask you, what question would you have for our next guest?
If not now, when? When are you going to get engaged? When are you going to reach higher? I think we limit ourselves sometimes. We get comfortable. And it's okay being comfortable. Everybody can't be a type A like me. We'd probably all be crazy if everybody was a type A. But when are you going to reach beyond yourself and use some of the things you've been blessed with for others? When? And it's not all given to you to hoard and to leave behind. It's given to you to use for the betterment of people around you in your society. When are you going to get engaged in that regard?
You heard that. When are you going to get engaged? Well, on that note, we thank you for joining us, Eugene Pettis. We thank you for your sharing your journey with us and imparting some of like that history and what it took to get here. I'm sure our viewers are going to be very pleased to watch this episode.
Keep doing what you're doing. And I think podcasts is such a good tool to reach people. And if you reach one, it's been worth it.
Each one teach one, brother.
Absolutely.
All right.
I appreciate you, my brother.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Up Close podcast. If you like what you've heard today, please go ahead and hit the notification button. And if you want to be alerted and see future videos, go ahead and hit the subscribe button.